All right. I think I am live. I am I'm essentially testing this out for the first time. I've never done a reaction video from StreamYard. So let me just double check, make sure I have this right. Okay, so if anybody is watching, can you let me know if there is an echo when I hit play on
If you
this?
do weigh, let's say the taste of milk, that's what you have on one side, and then the difference between like
Does this sound
oat
good?
and oat milk.
Hey, Christina. Glad you're here. Um, there is no echo. Okay, perfect. Okay, it's my first time using StreamYard for a reaction video. So okay, so we're gonna start here in just a sec. It's really hard to do a reaction video on here without two screens, so I'm gonna be having two screens at some point. Um, all right, here goes.
If you do weigh, let's say the taste of milk, that's what you have on one side, and then the difference between like oat and oat milk and normal milk to the suffering of a cow. Those are on your two sides. What if the problem with reducing your animal intake is actually chronic health problems? And then what you have on one side is an increase in chronic health problems. And then that's suffering compared to the life of an animal.
Well,
And chronic health, that's a different story, right? Welcome to episode 157 of my podcast. I'm Mikhaila Peterson. In this episode, I spoke with
Okay, sorry, I was trying to figure out a few things. I wanted to pause there. Um, yeah, I think that is an important thing that we do need to figure out. Now, it's sort of hypothetical because I think we have enough information to know that you can be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet. But considering that there are a lot of people that don't think so, there are a lot of studies that there's a lot of studies showing that you can be healthy on a vegan diet, but there are many studies showing that other diets are good, and there are many people like Mikhaila here that think other diets are necessary. And she's a perfect example because she's had a lot of health issues, and I like to take. I like to assume people are being honest, at least for sake of conversation. And so, if she's had these extreme health issues and she started eating only meat and nothing else, and that healed her problems, I like to accept this as a possibility. Now, I think the main thing that happened here was it's an elimination diet, so whatever was causing her problems was eliminated when she went down to just meat. So it doesn't mean that she should just do meat. It means she needs to figure out which things should have been eliminated and then consume fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds, the various things that shouldn't have. But considering the possibility that we can find out that certain humans might need certain animal products for optimal health, we do have to think about now. There's nothing wrong with saying this thing is horrible if we harm an animal. That's horrible, and so we shouldn't let people do it even if they need it for their own health. That's fine if you want to say that. I don't think I quite align with that, but if you do, you do. If you don't, then I guess we got to figure out what level of negative health would we let somebody get to before we'd say, in a perfect vegan world, that we care more about protecting the health of this person than not so much. So, anyways, I think it's something worth thinking about, even when we are convinced that we can eat perfectly healthy on a vegan diet. Okay, Christina says she has no evidence for veganism causing chronic illness or making it worse. There is more evidence that veganism does not affect or even relieves those symptoms. Her hypothetical makes no sense. Um, well, something being a hypothetical doesn't have to be covered by evidence. It would just be the hypothetical if this were the case. Now, I was trying to work out some sound, so I might have missed the exact wording she used. But this is also a coming soon, so she will repeat this part at some point. So, okay, here we go.
Alex OConnor. Alex is the founder of the Cosmic Skeptic YouTube channel and an ethical vegan. He uses his channel to facilitate philosophical and ethical debates that range in topics, but often focus on animal rights advocacy and religion. Alex is a recent graduate of Oxford, where he studied philosophy and theology. The last time I saw Alex, the first time we met in person, was at the Beyond Meat debate at Oxford, where I spoke about why we shouldn't ban meat altogether. Alex was at the debate, and I like him quite a bit, so I'm glad we could finally speak. It was a fun episode. I don't agree with veganism. I think the way forward is through regenerative agriculture, but I think we covered some very interesting topics. And I think I'll have Alex back on to discuss religion as well. Let me know what you guys think. This episode of the podcast was brought to you by Goldco, a leader in the precious metals industry. Inflation is at its highest rate since 1980, and I don't think anyone really knows how bad it's going to get. Our times are kind of unprecedented.
I don't know how to how to skip the ad, so I will just mute it for a second. I am glad that she's talking here. I'm not too familiar with Mikhaila. I know her father more. I'm fascinated by some of his stuff. I don't think everything he thinks is perfect or anything, but I do like the idea of seeing people on like the right side of the aisle talking with people more on the left side of the aisle. Her being pretty religious, talking to somebody like Alex who's an atheist. So I am excited when this kind of thing happens. Let's see.
$10,000 in free silver. Diversifying your portfolio is definitely a good idea at the moment. Visit
Oh my gosh. I think it's almost done.
$10,000 in free silver when you open a qualifying account. That's mplikesgold.com. Tell them that I sent you. Enjoy this episode. Alex OConnor, welcome to my podcast.
Mikhaila, it's good to see you again. If not in person, virtually, it's good to see that you're doing well.
Thank you very much. I feel like this podcast has been a long time coming, so it should be
It
good.
has.
It has, yeah, very long time. I think the last time we saw each other was at Oxford, right?
Yes, it was, and I have a bit of a bone to pick with you about that actually, because I remember not long after that event, which anybody who has seen or is familiar with the both of us might not know that I was there, because you were speaking and I was just kind of there as a guest in my fancy black tie, and there was one particular speaker on the other side to you, who it got kind of, people were making a bit of a song and dance out of this woman's speech, and I found it quite funny because I remember being in the room, and I'm sure people will have seen this because I'm pretty sure you took the clip and put it on your own channel, right?
Yeah, with some sort of inflammatory title.
Yeah, and I know your dad talked about it too, quite a bit, about this crazed woman, this crazed feminist woman who's doing this ridiculous vegan speech, and I must say it was a bit fanciful. And
A bit fanciful. I'm going to insert a clip here, and then we're going to see what people think about a bit fanciful.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to be diplomatic here.
I wish she would have inserted the clip there. I've seen at least the beginning of this a few times, and I've seen this video a couple times, and her reaction to a bit fanciful cracks me up each time. But yeah, the lady they're referring to, I thought she was pretty darn crazy. I might do a reaction to that at some point. But part of the problem is that she, I think she took it too much of a political route and tried to connect it to a lot of different things like colonialism. And I prefer when it gets kept just to being about the animals.
Because I did think it was hilarious because I was sort of sat on this front bench, and I was directly opposite your dad, and I thought, watching this speech is funny enough. Like, it was quite an entertaining thing to do, but I thought of all the people to do this speech in front of all the people on planet Earth, it was just hilarious. So I sort of seeing him just like shriveling in his chair.
Just like cringe and pain.
Yeah. But so there was this
funny.
So I remember sort of you and him both posting about it a lot, and I don't know, I wondered if you were sort of posting about it as if to say, hey, look at this wokeness, or whether you were posting it to say, hey, look at this sort of veganism. I didn't know if it was more the veganism part or more the woke part that you were sort of trying to warn of.
100% more the woke part. However, I do think that there is an overlap. Now, I don't think you embody that overlap. But I do think that there is an overlap, especially with people who are really interested in protecting the climate, veganism, like wokeism. I think there's an overlap. But what I was trying to portray with her video was the woke part for sure.
Yeah, I do hate the connection that happens where veganism gets put into a political category. I'm definitely not a fan of this. And it almost always goes this way. I think a lot of people think of vegans as being left leaning, and that might be the case for the majority. I'm not sure. I would say at very least like something like 60%, but I'm just not sure to what extreme. And it's a bummer because not only do I want people to just view it completely separate and just view it as something where you're caring about the animals, but it just sucks that politics gets looked that way. I actually, so I'll point this out, although I probably shouldn't or don't need to, but I'm kind of a centrist myself. I've always thought of myself as pretty liberal, but over the years, I've noticed that the left has gone to such an extreme that it's kind of put me more in the center. And I guess most people that are around my current view now aren't what people think of when it comes to vegans. And so it was very nice to see a new friend, but who I hadn't met until recently, George Martin of Carnism Debunked. Is just very interesting to see a person. Now, I think he might be a little more right-leaning than myself. Not that it matters, no offense to anybody, but I'm very far from right-leaning or conservative. But I think this movement needs to be politically open. We need to, like, I saw a debate that Carnism Debunked did with somebody else, and they were talking about if somebody wore like a Trump shirt to a vegan protest, and they were a vegan but a Trump fan, and the lady talking said she would want that person to go home or to change their shirt. That's ridiculous. You should have you should have everybody on every aisle of everything. If you're there for the animals, talking about the animals, wearing that Trump shirt will show people like, hey, you can be a Republican and also a vegan, and this shares a good message. Now, it doesn't mean that people should be openly spreading ideas that one might think of as hatred, like anti-gay stuff or something, at a vegan thing. If you start getting wonky with it, then it's like, okay, that's not what this is for. Save that for a different protest. Same thing on the other side. You shouldn't be fighting for like trans rights at a vegan protest. You should be focusing on the vegan side of things. And so anyways, I think this is an interesting point. I don't know if there's a way to fix this. It's not common, but a handful of the people that are kind of centrist or conservative leaning that do commentary on politics will have the name soy boy, referring to left-leaning people. And I think this is the idea of judging people and name calling is so ridiculous, but I really hate it because sometimes I'll see somebody have a good point. I'll like be on their side. That'll be like the centrist side of whatever's happening. And when I see that name calling, I'm just like, you're making fun of this person because you're calling leftists vegans, and I'm a vegan and I'm not a leftist. And anyway, so it's so irritating. I really wish we should get away from those connections. I do want to respond to a couple of comments on here. Is food really real, or is it an idea? We can just eat grass, vegans. Okay, that's silly. So Red Briar, if you have any actual questions, I will answer them. I just didn't feel like that was one. A centrist between Republican and Democrat, or a centrist between the wider political spectrum? It's complicated. I don't know. What I will say is that I don't follow a group for the sake of it being a group. If I have a stance on it, I have a stance on it. So as you know, I'm vegan, and that's usually a left-leaning thing. I'm anti-circumcision, and that's a left-leaning thing. I'm anti-death penalty, and that's a left-leaning thing. I'm skeptical about puberty blockers for trans kids. And so that's maybe a more right-leaning thing. I'm supportive of trans people, and so that's a left-leaning thing. I'm on the fence, and it's such a philosophical topic, but I'm currently very leaning of pro-life, at least at the level of sentience. And that's more of a right-leaning thing. But I've gone back and forth. I used to be very pro-choice. And I'm probably more pro-gun than I am anti-gun. And but then again, I'm pro I'm pro legalizing drugs, but there's a caveat to it, and that's a left-leaning thing. And so, and it used to be that a left-leaning thing was free speech, and now free speech is a right-leaning topic. I don't get how this happened, but anyways, I'm very pro free speech. But I'm mostly a libertarian that knows that there are needs for helping people out. But I lean pretty libertarian. Anyways, yeah, the Trump shirt itself is not necessarily offensive. If someone were wearing a shirt with a slur, I would want them to leave. God, yeah, I find that tough. I'm not sure, because I might want somebody to leave if they were saying certain words. And so, should we view wearing a shirt? It would really depend on what it is, and I'd want to counter if there was something on the other side. How would it matter? I was asking because as a European, both Republicans and Democrats are right to me. Oh, I see. Yeah, and that might be worth conversation at another point. Christina, I'd actually love to have you on my other channel that covers mostly politics and philosophy, and it'd be interesting to talk about different things. I would say I'm against abortion in the third trimester because that is when the when it's sentient. I'm very anti-gun, but it's not really an issue over here. Yeah, we should definitely chat about those things at some point.
Sure. I think most of the language she used had more to do with that than veganism.
Yeah. It's actually one of the main things that I try to promote whenever I'm talking about veganism or just the ethics of animal suffering more broadly, is to try and separate it from, I want to say political connotations, but that's a little bit too broad. But there's this idea that to be a vegan, you have to take up yoga and wear loose clothing and grow out your hair and this kind of thing. I think we need more vegans who wear suits. We need more vegans who are sort of culturally on the right, not because I think it's good to be culturally on the right, but just because I think it's important to separate the issue of animal exploitation as being bad.
All right. Linda Carroll said, veganism as an ethical philosophy transcends all ideologies. It's about liberation from suffering and freedom to live a protected life. Yeah, I definitely agree. And there is a lot of crossover. Like when you talk about one topic, it might be worth talking about another. I don't think we should be limited to this is the most important topic, so the rest don't matter. But I don't think we should connect them all. I don't think we should say at this vegan rally, we need to make sure that the speakers are specifically trans and black and female or anything like that. Each of the separate things matter on their own, to their own degree. Let's see. Economics. I do agree that vegans should be a variety of different people. It would make the vegan identity seem more accessible to others. Yes.
From being a kind of fringe woke phenomenon, which is what at least veganism certainly is at the moment. Which is why I'm glad that you're willing to have me on to talk about this, because I know that the perception of veganism is pretty negative. I mean, the biggest problem that the vegan community faces is probably a PR problem. And I guess I'm just trying to contribute to removing that problem. It's quite difficult to know why exactly it is that it's connected in that way. I think it's got something to do with the fact that people on the left and people who are part of this woke phenomenon are certainly more inclined to be in favor of radical revolutionary thought. It's something that it sort of gives them something to fight about, and this is what a lot of it's about. And of course, veganism is a wonderful example of this, because you have this huge problem of animal exploitation in factory farms that definitely needs solving. And so it makes sense to me that this would be like, music to the ears of people who are wanting a social issue to fight strongly for. But I resent to see that it's often reduced to that this sort of, it's intrinsically connected to this wokeness, which wokeness itself has become a bit of a meme. It's not even clear exactly what it means.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems here, sorry, my brain just exploded. I think one of the biggest problems here is that humans are kind of designed to get along with their tribe, and you don't want to push too far away from your people. So that's why most people that are right-leaning would kind of attack everything left-leaning, and most people left-leaning would attack anything right-leaning. And as soon as something is described as a certain leaning, you're kind of against it, and it doesn't matter if you really think it or not, you're just against it. Now, this is just seems to be the majority of people and maybe how the majority are wired, but I think this is why it's worth thinking outside the box. This is why it would be great if some right-leaning people, which I'm seeing a lot more now, are anti-circumcision. And it'd be great if, we start seeing more pro-life people that happen to be left-leaning, like to be willing to say, I'm a human and there's all these topics in the world and I mostly lean towards this political party, but I view this thing differently. And to be open when you hear, if you see somebody that is right-leaning that's vegan, sure, have conversations with them about why you disagree with them on various other things, but not to the extreme where they connect the veganism to that.
But I guess I'm trying to sort of move the perception away from that and say that no, what veganism really is about, at least ethical veganism, or the kind of veganism that I would promote, is the rather simple proposition that if we can avoid inflicting unnecessary suffering, then we should do so. That's what it breaks down to for me. So, thanks for having me on to talk about it. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think part of the issue is a lot of people who are pushing veganism, from what I've seen, like the people with the viral videos online, I don't know if they're interested in veganism to reduce animal suffering or to make themselves appear as if they're doing something virtuous, right? Like that's the main goal of their veganism. So I think what you're doing,
God, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anybody intentionally doing that. I mean, some obviously, but the majority, even vegans that I kind of look down on because I don't like their approach of how they treat people, like people have seen me talk about Joey Carbstrong. I don't think there are many people out there that are just like, I'm going to pretend to be vegan so people will think I'm so virtuous. No, I mean, anybody that's vegan and vocally vegan, they care about the animals, but sometimes I think they maybe don't think it through all the way. I think in some cases, maybe in too many cases, people look at it as, this is my group. My group does not eat meat, eat dairy, eat eggs, or eat honey, or buy products that make animals suffer. My group does that, and we would like you to be part of our group. But if you aren't part of our group completely, then you're nothing to us. And I think that harms the movement. And I think maybe the majority of the people in the movement have that feeling. It's almost like a religion. And I don't mean in a bad sense. I mean, everything I just listed is great things. And that's why I'm vegan. And I too am actionably part of that group. I don't do those things. And those are great things. But the idea of declaring, I am part of this group, I am doing this thing currently, and therefore, if you haven't gotten to the level of doing them currently, then you are viewed as this other, like the way that like a Christian might look at a non-Christian or whatever religion, fill in the blank. And so I think that might be one of the biggest issues. But I don't think it's that people are pretending to be vegan just to look virtuous. No way.
Puts you in a different camp than what a lot of people are doing. And I think that's maybe where the overlap with wokeness is, which is there are some, I wouldn't even call them woke, but there are some people, a lot of people on the left that are actually interested in equality and reducing suffering, really. And then there are people who are just interested in it so that they appear virtuous.
Yeah, but then, of course, that's the problem with any ethical issue. It can be difficult to separate those people who are doing it for the sake of really caring, and those who don't. But equally, because if you do something long enough, especially if you make it sort of your job. So for quite a while, advocating for veganism and making noise about animal suffering was essentially all I was doing all the time, talking on podcasts, giving talks, this kind of thing. And it gets to a point where you're sort of talking very emotively about the suffering of animals, but you're talking about it so much that it's almost like you don't really feel it anymore. And so, I like to sort of take breaks and make sure that I'm constantly rethinking what I'm saying and not being, I guess, dogmatic about it. But I think, sometimes you might see people who look as though they're just doing it for the sake of it. They don't really care about animals. They're just doing it because they think it looks good or something like that. But I think that can actually often be just a result of the fact that these people are talking about it so much that you basically become insensitive to it.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, I've had that happen even just with me going on other people's podcasts talking about my health experience. Even when I went to Oxford and talked about my health experience, it's like at a certain point, I've talked about it so much and which is good psychologically. It's I've like desensitized myself to it, so it's not traumatizing anymore. But it also means that the emotions associated with it aren't like raw like they were, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you were in Oxford and we took a picture together and posted it on Instagram, and I got quite a lot of messages from my vegan followers and even my non-vegan followers sort of being like, why are you hanging out with the antithesis of the vegan movement? Because
I'm not the antithesis though. That's the thing. Is like I had an issue with animal suffering for my entire life. I stopped eating pork when I was like 14 because I figured, pigs are the most intelligent. They probably suffer the most, and I don't have to eat that. I've always thought meat was healthy, and I think that's probably because my grandpa hunted, so it was like in my family. But I mean, even since carnivore or the lion diet, I've tried to be careful about where my animals are from, and I have enough money that it's not difficult for me to source meat from farms that raise the animals in like the best way I see possible. If you are going to end up killing an animal, at least not factory farming.
Okay, so this is where it gets tricky, and a lot of people are going to view what she's saying as horrible, and it's because we kind of have this all or nothing approach. And with ourselves, it is all or nothing. It's we cut it out completely. We achieve that, so we want other people to achieve that. But here's the thing: we're doing what we're doing because we know that we can cause less suffering. We know that less suffering can be caused. When people bring up like, oh, what about Eskimos here that the only thing they can eat is whales or whatever, we point out, well, we're not talking about them. We're talking about people in the first world. We're talking about you right now, the person sitting at this table. You have options. Why don't you go vegan? Because we're not talking about the possibility of ending it everywhere in the world. Really, what we're talking about is the goal to cause a lot less suffering. And hopefully we can have some laws that go in favor of this, and we can convince a lot of people. But again, it's so important to remember that we are going for less suffering. So what Mikhaila is saying here, she's actually right. Again, I like to assume people are being honest. And if even her eating only meat and nothing else, she is more vegan than the majority of people. Now, let's assume she cut out eating pig stuff, which I think one of the saddest farming practices is how pigs are handled. So I think, did she say she eats only lamb? Maybe she eats lamb and beef. I don't know. But let's assume that lamb or sheep in general are less intelligent and maybe lower on the sentient scale. I'm not saying they are, but anyways, that part doesn't matter. We don't even need to think about that element. But like she said, she's wealthy enough. She's getting her stuff from farms where it's all grass-fed, grass finished, whatever that means. And the animal dies, and us vegans will always ask people, is there really a humane way to kill something? And sure, there's not. There's more humane or less humane, but there's not a humane way. But if you look at, if she's not eating dairy at all, not eating eggs, dairy I'd say is one of the worst elements of what we do with animals. And then if she's just consuming this and nothing else, she's not eating any of the things that involve the pesticides, rodenticides, all these various different things. Not that I'm saying that's worse. Hopefully that doesn't come across as confused. But what I'm trying to say is, if everybody in the world not everybody in the world, but if all the carnists in the world switched over to exactly what she was consuming. Now, I don't know if that's sustainable, the grass-fed and all that kind of stuff. But if they switched over to what she's eating, they stopped eating any dairy, any eggs, and they only ate animal meat from farms where the animals just roamed around eating grass, whatever, having a great life, and then sadly their lives are taken from them. The amount of suffering that would be cut down would be amazing. It'd be so amazing having all these factory farms shut out. So anyways, I just want to point that out because I think it's worth noting. Like something I'm going to do this summer is I want to go around. I live in Oregon. I want to go around and find local farms that have grass-fed animals, and they sell the meat and whatnot. And I want to try to support them in a sense. I want to try to convince my friends that maybe care about the ethics of animals a little bit, but they will not go vegan. I want to convince them, like, hey, maybe would you get your meat from this local place that does grass-fed stuff or whatever, because that would be cutting down on doing the more unethical stuff. And somebody might think, hey, it'd be great if we went to this farm that has this grass-fed animals and they butcher their animals. It'd be great if we could somehow get them shut down. Well, you wouldn't want them shut down, because in a society that we live in where eating animals is legal, you want as many of those farms to exist, because those farms are countering the factory farms. If you get a grass-fed farm to shut down, then all of the people that purchase the food from that grass-fed farm, they'll either go to another grass-fed farm, which won't change anything, or they'll go and get, if there's not another grass-fed farm nearby and they just like give up on caring about that idea, then they'll just go get factory farmed stuff. So I'm not saying that any vegan should start eating like grass-fed meat or anything, but I think we need to recognize the difference between better and worse, and point it out when we notice it.
Right. So I'm definitely on board with the reduce suffering. And I think that helps. Factory farming is also an issue for the environment.
Phone charging slowly.
Yeah.
This is the fastest phone charger on the market.
There's 90% chance
as well, right? And it's just
Certainly.
that's not a comfortable way to live. And if you watch, like, anybody who watches videos of factory farming, it's like, that's not good, right? Nothing about that looks good.
See, this is it. This is exactly what we need. A carnivore person that eats only meat recognizes that factory farm's bad. Now, I know a lot of people talk about this and will say, like, oh, they'll talk about it, but they won't do it or whatever. Sure, we can't make somebody do something, but what's great is getting them to talk about it. It's kind of like, you can't make people be not racist, but you can create a society where the ideas shift so much that people are scared to come out and be racist. You don't really see many racist people. You don't hear it on the street. You don't see it much on social media because people are scared to do it because it's not accepted in our society. So even if, sure, some people talk about being anti-factory farming when really they support it, as long as they're vocal about it. So this is something I think we need to work towards getting a push going on. If we can talk to more non-vegans about this and get them all on board to be anti-factory farms, then we can start pushing in the right direction of a vegan future. We can start pushing towards regulations that, like, one thing that I think needs to happen, and I guess this happens in maybe Australia and maybe England. farms have to have cameras that the feed of the camera goes to the government, so the government can see what's happening in the farms. I watched this video, Humane Hancock, I think it was. No, it was somebody else, Cranky Vegan. Where in Australia, some activists snuck into this factory. They hid cameras in there, and they showed some things that were happening. And this farm did not have their CCTV cameras up like they're supposed to have. And because of that, the factory got shut down. And that's great. I thought that was one of the coolest forms of activism I've seen in a while, was the idea of sneaking in and putting in hidden cameras. But a big part of what we should want to do, because changing laws and the way people think about things is a long process. Obviously, if we can get people to go vegan, that's great. But until we can get them to do that, I think what we need to do is to get people to recognize that there's issues with factory farms. And if they care about animals, they should at least, even if they're going to eat them, they should want them to be treated well. And so if we get everybody on board and it talked about more, that's what gets politicians to announce things they want to do, because they want to be elected, because they want to please us. So if you notice, whatever the most popular things being talked about are the things talked about when politicians are running for office, because they want to please us. And this is how we see laws change over time. In the 1960s, interracial marriage laws changed. 2003, laws on gay sex change. 2015, laws on gay marriage change. All these things like slowly change because enough people talk about it. So sure, we can keep talking about go vegan, but also separately, we can talk about the importance of changing regulations. While it's still legal to eat animals, we can work towards making things better, making conditions have to be better, making treatment have to be better, having security cameras in all farms. It can just be, if you have a farm, you have to have security cameras. And then if they see this mistreatment, if they see workers just going around kicking animals and various different things, if there's any mistreatment aside from the death at the end, then these farms can get shut down, and various different regulations can go in for size of cages and all these different things. And it's sad, and we'll hate it, but we'll love it that much more than it currently is, because there'll be so much less suffering. So anyways, I can't remember what was said that led me to say all that, but I'm going to read a couple of these comments real quick. But the problem is that she's also spreading misinformation. So overall, I wouldn't call her more vegan than most. Which part is the misinformation? Okay, but I don't think she realizes that 99% of animals are raised on factory farms in the U.S. She might not. I'm not sure. I think she only made the claim that the stuff she purchases is not from factory farms. And she tells her fans to buy the best you can afford, which still allows for the vast majority who aren't rich to buy factory farmed. Yeah, I mean, that's true. So in her mind, she thinks it's the healthiest approach because it worked for her. And so she's saying the best thing to do would be to get this grass-fed, grass-finished, hormone-free stuff. But if you can't, then do whatever else. It's kind of like Michael Greger from Nutrition Facts will say it's best to get organic because all the pesticides and the non-organic stuff, but still the health benefits of most fruits and veggies are so high that it's better to eat non-organic fruits and veggies than it would be to eat all the processed garbage. So the health benefits outweigh the pesticides so much, but still you'd want the organic, which is complicated and a whole other vegan topic as well. But so you're right. The people listening to her that aren't wealthy enough to get the grass-fed stuff, that those people would be less vegan than her. So yeah. Let's see. Okay, Vogon Poetry said, there are some cases where I don't understand the value of being charitable. In this example, they are empirically wrong and functionally malicious to our movement. Ridiculous. Feels like a proportionate response here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, or maybe I missed something. I think this is a very good place to be charitable, to point out that this person that is doing this act, that it causes less suffering than your average person causes. It's worth pointing out. Okay, let's see. Grass-fed is still factory farmed in most cases, but whatever. Okay, yeah, fair enough. And I need to learn more about it, and I think maybe there needs to be multiple terms, because it does suck when there are certain if you meet certain standards, you can be called grass-fed or organic or these various different things, even if it doesn't mean much. For example, I think free-ranged eggs, the chickens maybe only have like double the space, but it's still a tiny space. And so if we want less suffering, then we got to fight for better. So even though we fight for don't eat eggs at all, we should still also fight for the standards of regulations for free range to be better standards. And same thing with grass fed. I had recently learned about grass fed for the first time. I always assumed it meant like green grass. And it turns out that grass fed just means it's not corn, it's not soy meal. It's like grass, like hay, but it also could mean green grass. So, and I don't know the difference between grass-fed and grass-finished, because a lot of times people will say both of those. So I'm curious to look into that. But I think it's worth us figuring out all these different things, even though it might seem counterproductive to work towards better conditions. It's still, those are the current ones alive. When we think of the individual animals, those individuals are out there now. And if we individuals that are alive now, animals that are in farms, that 1 year from now will still be there. I'm not sure if there are any. I know it wouldn't be chickens. I don't know how long they keep cows alive. But anyways, we could work towards things that make them suffer less, and also put our focus into veganism. But it depends on how much time you have as well. So, okay, the labels are not reliable. When you tell people to buy high quality and humane, you're putting way too much trust in the label made by the animal industry with a motive to profit. Yeah, and that might be true. Again, I don't know all the details on it, and this should be maybe information we should spread and make people aware of and fight for changes on. If the industries make the labels themselves, then maybe we should fight for them to not be able to make the labels themselves, and maybe fight for the labels to be accurate. There are a lot of issues with labels. Okay, hey, Michael. Okay, here we go. No.
Yeah, it seems like everybody knows this, but it's worth bearing in mind that something like I want to say over 95% of animal products consumed. I'm not sure about America. I think it's higher. I think it's something like 98%. But the vast majority of animal products consumed come from factory farms. Of course, if you ask people on the street, do you eat meat or something like this, and they can tell that you're sort of maybe going to raise an ethical concern, they'll often say something like, well, yeah, but I try to make sure that I get it from the best kind of sources. I know that there are people in the world who do this. There are a lot of people. But at the same time, I find it quite a mystery that pretty much anybody that I speak to about this will say, yeah, I try to make sure that my meat and my animal products come from ethical sources. And that makes up the vast majority of people. And yet it is simultaneously the case that the vast majority of our animal products are coming from factory farms.
Yeah, well, I think one of the problems here also is that we need to have conversations with people close to us. So one of the most important things for veganism is conversations with strangers face to face, whether it's face to face on Zoom or something, or face-to-face, actual face-to-face. But we can't really follow up with those people, and they might lie to us, like he was saying. But if we want to have those conversations, we have to take what they're saying as what they're saying. But when we talk to our friends, and we can convince our friends they won't go vegan, but we can convince them to do grass-fed, hormone-free stuff. If we see them eating at McDonald's and we go, "Hey, what you doing? I thought you're doing this." You know, we don't want to be assholes. We don't want to push our friends away. But if our friends like us to be honest with them and talk to them about stuff, we can point out like, "Hey, you said you were doing this thing," and you know, people fall off the wagon, so you can keep up with people. Like I have friends that told me they were gonna cut back on dairy, and they were gonna try some dairy-free like ice creams and stuff like that. And so every week or so, I'll say, "Hey, did you try this one yet? Or how you doing on the cutting it out?" And every little bit helps. But sure, people can lie for sure.
I'm not sure that people are being either totally honest, or maybe they don't quite understand the breadth of factory farming and the grasp that it has over our food. Of course, if you're really tracking the food, if you've got your own farm or something like that, then it's easy enough. But if you walk into a supermarket or a restaurant or a fast food chain, into a KFC, into a Starbucks or something, this is all factory farmed. And the real strength of the vegan movement is against factory farming. Right, like the reason that I'm sort of like getting up on a soapbox, as it were,
well, it should be the strength of it. I don't think it's, in a sense, it's the most talked about, because when you see the videos on the street and people doing the cubes or truth or whatever, that is what's being shown. I think for the most part, I don't know if any of the free range or grass-fed videos are shown for that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem to be the focus in the way that I think it should be. It doesn't seem to be the focus in the way, like, imagine all the Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong videos that we see where they debate people. Imagine if the goal of debating was to get them to politically feel anti-factory farming. Like, imagine if it was just like nice conversations with people that would leave going, "Oh yeah, I agree with these guys. Like, I'm not going to stop eating meat and dairy, but I agree with these guys. So I'm definitely going to cut back a lot or get these certain types of products." And then when they talk to their friends, like, the world becomes more conscious about this. That'd be incredible. Let's see. Christina said in the Netherlands, we have what's called Better Life. That's the label. So like grass-fed, but this one's Better Life. 3 stars. The highest for chickens basically means a 1 m squared. I'm not sure what that size exactly is with the measurement. There can be like 20 chickens, still horrible. Yeah. Whatever the regulations are, I think it's best to find the worst things that are done and to try to get our government, it's a squared meter, to get our government to change these things for the better. When you go back in time, like, look at car seats for toddlers from the 50s. It looked like a freaking tiny metal cage where there's no protection. But regulations change things for safety, to remove issues of harm. And so I think, it's illegal to kick a dog in the face for no reason. It's probably illegal to kick a cow in the face for no reason. So a farmer that owns a cow, if it was caught on film that it took a bat to a cow and started beating it up, it would probably be illegal, and that farmer would probably get in big trouble. So if we work towards making more and more things illegal that are harmful, we'd be moving in the right direction. And I think that's kind of what you need. You have to be moving in the right direction to make something change. Again, not that the way most vegans are doing things is bad. We can only each do what we're able to do and have time to do. And we have to pick from various different options. But yeah. Christina said, true, but if those are put in place, many farmers will still not follow them and face no repercussions. That's true, which is why I think due to a topic like this, where something can be harmed, I think there have to be cameras. There have to be something like, just kind of like we have street cameras that will capture people speeding. And luckily, like, cameras are one of the best ways we can catch murderers if there's a murder that happened and people can like trace like every camera from various like places to see what car went through here and to track cell phone provider stuff. Cameras are one of the best ways to capture a wrong act happening. And I think people, freedoms are good. That's why I'm mostly libertarian. I'm in favor of people having their freedoms, but I don't think a good society would have freedoms to just have full control over an animal that can feel. And so since animals can suffer, I think that if we have a setup to where animals can be used for their fur and their meat and their dairy and their eggs, I think we need to at least have laws making it as humane as possible. And so there have to be cameras in there that are making people have to. It's essentially like police having body cams. We need to hold them accountable. I think most police officers are great, but there are bad police officers, and the only way to make sure those bad police officers don't do bad things is to have these body cams. So I think even if we got to a level where most farmers are great, if you have that power to abuse and you can abuse something that is voiceless, you need to have your government be able to see through video what you are doing. I think so. I'd be curious to hear others' thoughts on that.
And trying to proselytize about this kind of thing, Vegangalism as it's sometimes called, is really because of the plight of animals in factory farms. You know, if we were still doing farming how we were a few hundred years ago, it would still be an interesting ethical problem to solve. There'd still be, especially if we have alternatives available, there'd be an important ethical question as to whether we have the right to breed animals into existence and take their lives away from them and inflict certain sufferings in their life. But it certainly wouldn't be the forefront of my campaigning. It wouldn't be the main thing that I spend my time doing. It's really about the factory farming, which is why I say when people were surprised to see, I mean, even if you were the antithesis of vegan, like to take a picture together, I mean, it's hardly the most incriminating thing in the world. But I got that impression just from talking to you then as well, that at least ostensibly we're both against, let's say, unnecessary animal suffering. And that's what the vegan position, in my view, essentially reduces to. Now, you're right to say that there's an environmental problem as well. That's actually not something that I talk about very much, because I think that more people are going vegan now for the environment rather than the ethics, which, sure, it's kind of admirable, but it seems to me like it sort of misses the point ethically. It would be as if we were sort of stood on a hill and we saw this factory in the distance. It was like a puppy mill that was breeding and torturing puppies and forcing them into cages and disbudding them and this kind of thing. And you said, oh, this is so terrible, we need to end this. And I said, yeah. And you said, I mean, just look at the fumes it's emitting. It's so bad for the environment. It's like, okay, you're not wrong, you're not incorrect about that, but I feel like you're sort of maybe missing the ethical point here. The real motivating factor of all of this for me is the suffering. But look, we have an animal suffering problem in factory farming, which on its own, in my view, I've said this a few times before, on its own is a good enough reason to abolish factory farming and probably go vegan. There's an environmental case against factory farming because they're just absolutely disastrous to the environment, which again, on its own, the environmental case would be good enough reason to abolish factory farming. There's also a pandemic prevention case. I did a TEDx talk about this, that while our governments were telling us to keep as far apart from each other as possible, we're simultaneously cramming tens of billions of disease-ridden animals into these ridiculous, ignoble hellholes to share their diseases with each other and just exponentially increase the risk of them developing into a zoonotic disease with the potential to infect other human beings. So the pandemic prevention on its own, when our governments say they're doing everything they can to prevent this kind of thing happening again, it's like, give me a break. As long as factory farming is still on the scene, it's an absolute joke. That on its own is good enough reason to abolish factory farming. Antibiotic resistance. Most people know that antibiotic resistance is the big fear of the medical community, but the majority of antibiotics that are sold are used on livestock, not human beings. Right, and so this is driving your antibiotic resistance. So what you have here, and there's also like health concerns, but I think that's a bit more technical. So, but just take those four, right? You've got the suffering case, the environmental case, the antibiotic resistance case, pandemic prevention case, which each on their own is enough reason to abolish factory farming, right? But we have all four of them, all of them together on one side of the scale. And then I ask people, what's on the other side of the scale? For most people, it's a sausage roll. Right? It's milk in your coffee.
Well, I see that's
bacon
where
in the morning.
this is where we disagree. And I think this was brought up with some of the people on the vegan side.
All right, Christina, I see that you just said, I don't like him talking only about factory farms. Why is that? Is there anything more important within veganism than ending factory farming, or at least making it somewhat better? Somebody said more cameras is obvious. There's there's a reason people go to jail for filming inside factory farms and slaughterhouses. The industry knows that having eyes on them is not in their interest. Yes, definitely. And I think that's one of the, that is a huge issue. I've heard of it. I'm not sure how common it is that if you got caught filming in a farm that you would get in trouble. And I also wonder if it's the filming or if it's the fact that you broke onto the property. Either way, if I don't condone damaging property, and I don't think there's a benefit to rescuing animals from farms. But I do like the idea of people that if they could break in, set up cameras and show these horrible actions happening, that would be good. But yeah, I don't know exactly how. It would just be conversations about it. But I don't know how to get politicians to work towards bills to have the regulations change to make cameras inside of these places. But really, it's conversations. Maybe that's just a thing that needs to be brought up constantly by vegans, is that we need to have cameras in factory farms. In fact, if you asked all the meat eaters in the world, would you sign a petition saying that they had to put cameras in factory farms so they would be forced to treat their animals ethically? I'm guessing most of them would say yes. Now, the impact on animal suffering would change drastically just by this one element happening, which is cameras in farms, even if they were supplied by the government. I'm guessing the majority of people would sign that petition quick. And so that's the thing. There's so many things that we could work with carnists on instead of just pushing them away. Okay, so I asked Christina if there's anything worse than factory farms or why that shouldn't be the thing to talk about. And then Christina said, because only saying factory farming is bad, which is true, gives credence to her whole regenerative farming thing. And then he doesn't even push back on that. Now, I agree with you that conversations are usually best when there is pushback, and that he should push back on the regenerative farming as well. I think it's fun to push back, even playing devil's advocate on things that you don't agree on. But in this, it would have even made sense with his own beliefs. But still, again, think about it. Think about, even though regenerative farming isn't the end goal that I want everybody to decide on their own to stop eating animals. But if the world went from what it is now to only regenerative farming, and I don't know the exact details of how that looks, but if it just went to that level of, instead of factory farms, you just had grass-fed, free-roaming, let's say a hypothetical, animals with great lives, but their lives are taken from them and then eaten by all the non-vegans and vegetarians out there. If that happened in, say, 20, 25 years, I would consider that the best goal towards veganism that we've ever seen in human history. Obviously, for most of human history, that's kind of what it was, and then we got factory farming. But now that we have factory farming, the goal would be to get closer to that. So yeah, I think, let's see. Okay. Carson, it's because exploitation others unnecessarily is fundamentally wrong. By harping on factory farms, specifically gives off the idea that animal agriculture could be excused, by doing it in a nice way. Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but again, we still want to work towards what is best. We want less suffering, or at least for me, I want less suffering for animals. So even though if I had my way and I could convince everybody, I just said nobody would exploit animals in any way, we wouldn't even have pets, any of that stuff. I'm probably personally one of the most extreme vegans I know as far as what I think is morally right. No pets whatsoever. No any of the things. Animals are just off in the wild. We don't have any interactions with any of them. But in the world we live in, I have to recognize the laws and all this stuff. And what I would want is to do my part to do the best I can to have less suffering happen. So even though this exploitation is not good, in this case, it is best. It is better than what we currently have. So let's see. Linda says, language is so important. We are speaking of individual lives, sentient subjects. So right to rescue saves individual beings from the horrible fate. That's why each life is important. Right to rescue. I don't know if that's in reply to when I pointed out that I don't condone the damage of farms, and I don't condone rescuing animals from farms, but I do condone the sneaking in and putting cameras in. The reason I don't condone the rescuing of animals is because you aren't really rescuing an animal. You are just putting them in demand to make another one have to be bred into existence. Unless you stealing gets that farm to have to shut down, if the farm has to have 1,000 cows and you can go there and sneak out 10 of the 1,000 and load them up onto a truck and take them to your sanctuary, and you rescued it and you took it to live its great life out, this animal that was already bred to be what it was and already suffered is going to have a great end of its life. But now that farm needs 10 more. So they have it's almost as if they sold those 10, because they have to treat it like however many disappear, that's how many they need. So they have to breed that many more. And the suffering just gets added to in that case. And that's why I think it would be best to not rescue. I don't know if there's any cases where rescuing animals would be beneficial, aside from maybe sharing a message. I've seen cases where people break into laboratories that do testing on monkeys and they let the monkeys out. Now, again, I mean, those monkeys are probably just going to go off and get hit by cars or whatever and die. But hypothetically, let's say they could escape completely. Unless you get that laboratory to shut down, they're going to have to go get more monkeys to test on. So we want to change the regulations. We want to change it legally. And currently they have regulations that make it so you have to provide a certain amount of reasoning for doing studies, and I don't think it's a good enough reasoning. But we can get those regulations probably look a lot better than they did, say, 50 years ago. And so we can just try to push for better regulations. But I could be convinced otherwise. If somebody thinks it's good to rescue animals from places, and that I'm not right about the idea of that just putting them in demand, let me know. Exclusive regenerate farming is literally impossible. We would need 3 Earths. Yeah, that might be true. I don't know how to handle the idea of people saying something wouldn't be sustainable. Whenever vegans talk, people will say you can't sustain that. You can't make this happen. And whenever non-vegans talk about regenerative farming, people say you can't sustain this. And so in my mind, it's probably best to look at what's best. And as soon as something becomes unsustainable, then you look at what's best in that moment. So everybody has their guess of what we can achieve if you try to imagine a only vegan world or an only regenerative farming world. And maybe it's just ignorance on my part to want to ignore that. But what I think right now is my neighbor that eats meat, they could cut out meat. Their neighbor that eats meat could cut out meat. At some point, maybe being vegan isn't sustainable. And the next 10 factory farms near me could turn their farms into regenerative farming. They can do that. Maybe the next 20, maybe the next 1,000. And at some point, maybe it won't be sustainable. But each person doing the more right thing, I feel, is best. And so I not only do I not have time to read every single study or prediction on why and what cases would be sustainable in the future. I don't think it really changes anything, because even if for every human we couldn't sustain a certain thing, every little bit does matter. Even if I could press a button right now and know that the world couldn't be vegan, it couldn't work, I would still say, okay, well, we need to have as many vegans as possible until we're at the level of it not working, right? We would want the best thing possible. And to me, that's what veganism is causing the least amount of suffering. And you would get, and the least amount of rights violations, but you would want to get as close to that as you can. And obviously you can't go further. Let's see. Yes, Alex is essentially saying exploitation is fine if it's done nicely. No, Christina, I don't think he is. I think he's saying that it's done so bad with factory farming that it being done nicely would be such a step up that has to be the focus. Because in my mind, it is. In my mind, the most important thing we can do is a push towards better treatment of animals in this world we have. But that doesn't mean that I think if they're treated humanely that it's not wrong. A wrong action is still wrong. You just want to go towards the better, the best you can, you know? Okay. You can grant that one might be less harmful, but you should also put your foot down and say the nicer option is still wrong. I agree. I don't know to what extreme you should put the foot down. I mean, I don't know how often you need to point it out. But yeah, usually when I'm talking, like I'll have conversations with hunters and I'll point out, like, they'll tell me they care about animal suffering and they don't like the idea of factory farms. So that's why they like to get a portion of what they eat from hunting, because this deer's out in the wild, it's living this life, its life is ended quickly, and there's no suffering. And I'll point out, like, well, that's better than most people do. So I do think that's great that you're doing that. It doesn't mean I would consume that. Like, hearing that doesn't make me think, okay, this is acceptable. I still think we shouldn't eat animals when we don't need to, and therefore I don't do it. So yes, I do like to point out that it's wrong, even if I also like to point out the things that can be done to do it better. Oh, that's funny. You said, like, hunting, for instance, would be wildly more unsustainable than the current system if you adopt en masse. Yeah, so that's a perfect example. So yeah, if you ended all farming and then everybody had to hunt, not only would that be kind of wild and scary because there'd be so many hunters out that they'd probably shoot themselves or whatever. And vegans, please don't put horrible comments in the comments about how that would be good if hunters shot each other. I just lost track of thought. Yeah. So just because it wouldn't be sustainable for everybody to hunt, it doesn't mean that the better thing shouldn't be done. If somebody is going to go out and consume a whole bunch of meat from factory farms, and if they had the option to go hunt and they went and shot something that didn't suffer and they didn't make it suffer, and they consumed a lot of the meat from that hunt, or all the meat, or shared it with others, that would be cutting down on that much meat in demand. Now, sure, you wouldn't have endless amounts, but the more hunting, the better for animals. I think that's a clear, obvious thing. So in essence, you are advocating for the least sustainable option. No. I don't want to advocate for the least sustainable option. I'm not pressing a button because I'm king for a day and making something an official thing. I'm wanting better in the moment while we're here. Imagine yourself in the 1850s in the U.S. when women had practically no rights to anything. They couldn't own houses. They couldn't, if they had a divorce, they didn't own their children. If their husband died, their house would go to their oldest son instead of to them. Women didn't have pretty much any rights at all. And so at that time, I would be advocating for each of these rights. Women need to be able to own property. Women need to be able to get a divorce if they want. Women need to be able to have the rights to their children. All these different things. Women need to be able to vote. And each of these things I would want would be a step in the right direction. And but it wouldn't be I need them to have all this at once or nothing. It would be that almost every movement involves baby steps. And so if right now one person going out hunting causes less suffering to more animals in general, because somebody hunting is doing, in a sense, what we vegans are doing. When somebody becomes vegan, they stop buying animal products. Therefore, that many animal products less are put in demand. So that much less is brought into the factory farms or the other farms. And if somebody goes and hunts and they have that meat, then they're going to be purchasing less from the store, so there's less in demand. So even if it's not sustainable for everybody to do it, it doesn't mean I'm advocating for an unsustainable thing. It means that it is sustainable for that one person to do it, or 10 people to do it. Thousands of people right now can go hunting, and it'll make it better for animals at factory farms. And that doesn't mean that it's a not sustainable thing. It means that day-to-day things matter and overall things matter. And so I don't know what the final answer will be. There's no way for me personally to calculate how the environment's going to be affected by these things and what's going to be sustainable with regenerative farming and all these various different things. We just have to work step by step. Us saying regenerative farming won't work is just like the non-vegan saying, so since you want me to go vegan, you want these Eskimos to go vegan when the only thing they can eat is whales. No, you work on individuals to make progress. I think. Sorry, and I didn't mean that to sound offensive if I did. Alex in this conversation does not put his foot down at all. Watching it again a while ago made me realize he didn't really have a backbone at this point either, but that's just me. I don't know. I love Alex, and I do like this conversation. I think one thing he might be doing here, and maybe I have heard this before from him, is that he viewed this as a way to talk to people on the right side of the aisle, where he doesn't want to come across as this crazy person. And not that he's lying to them and being fake or anything. He's just wanting to be as reasonable as possible, especially in this case where her audience can hear him. Okay. I appreciate that you are largely talking about problematic ways to talk to people in real life, but if I'm being honest, condoning reducing over abstention, rubs me the wrong way, not trying to be confrontational. Yeah, no worries. I get kind of hyped up when I talk and I feel a little extreme about it. But yeah, no, either way is fine. And I don't need anybody to accept the way that I'm doing things, but like various things rub people the wrong way. And pragmatic. Oh, I see. Yeah. Like for example, if when I talk to people about veganism and they own pets, and I told them, hey, I don't think anybody should own pets, they view those pets as their family. And I don't think humans should own animals because I don't think we should have that control. Like those animals didn't give consent. Those animals probably shouldn't have been bred to be as domestic as they are. And dogs and cats should be wild dogs and cats in the world and not owned and trapped in by us. So if I talked, so in the sense where you're saying, talking to somebody about reducing doesn't sound good, where you need to talk about overall. If I talked about overall, it would get so extreme. There's so many ways that if you talk about, like I just said with the pet thing, but another thing I'm doing a video on soon is really, unless you are a complete health nut and eat perfectly healthy and you are the most fit person out there, you can't be vegan. Now to an extreme, we have what we call vegan, which is don't eat meat, dairy, eggs, don't purchase things where animals are harmed. But even though it's better to put pesticides on our crops and kill some insects than it is to do any of the factory farming stuff we're doing, we are killing many of animals with pesticides, and which is fine. We're protecting our food. But if we overeat our food, if we take this food we make and we make these processed fake meats and all these different things out of it, and being overweight and unhealthy, then not only are we protecting our food that we need to, so that's reasonable. But we are also protecting food we don't need because we want to consume for our taste buds. And we'll make these Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers, which I'm not saying not to do. I'm just showing examples of we all have our levels of what we call extreme. There are many birds and deer get affected by pesticides. Anything that consume bugs get affected by it pretty bad. And there's rodenticides, all these different things. Every time we consume something unhealthy for us that is vegan, that got in us because of our taste buds and because and we're willing to let these animals die for that case. Now, I don't, again, I'm not saying that you can't call yourself vegan if you don't do this. I'm just saying in the same sense that I'm pushing for reducing, if you're not pushing for that thing I just said about being perfectly healthy and not overweight, then somebody might view what you're saying as pushing for reducing. Because we could find out what the most extreme of extreme is. And you can talk about practicability, but practicability doesn't change the fact of you can have whole grain brown rice, you can have all these whole beans, you can have fruits and veggies and not do this processed stuff. Now, again, I'm not saying to not do that. I'm just saying there's different levels. Haas, how you doing? Haas Vegan is here. Carson, would you be willing to advocate for people to eat euthanize dogs and cats in order to reduce animal farming demand and and the number of animals killed by hunting? Let's see. Well, I wouldn't necessarily feel any need to reduce the animals killed by hunting, because I think that is improving animal suffering overall. But euthanize dogs and cats. Now, are you saying that if we take dogs and cats that people want to own and euthanize them, or do you just mean if there are strays that are yeah, I'm going to imagine you're meaning this. So we have dogs and cats, they're strays, they get picked up by the pound, and we could euthanize them. And let's imagine that they're edible like that. Well, I mean, I guess they're edible in a sense, but let's imagine that they're even like not horrible for us. Yes, I'd very much be in support of that. People eating them. I mean, people wouldn't eat them because they would feel disgusted by it. Okay. Haas says, I'm talking about the hundreds of thousands of animals whose bodies pile up in the shelters. Yeah. If people were willing to eat that, yeah, I think that'd be great. Do you think so? I don't know if this is a controversial thing or not. And then killing is not a necessary requirement of growing plants. Killing of insects, rodents, etc. is incidental and more symptomatic of the current non-vegan world. I'd be curious to hear exactly what you mean by incidental. But I agree with you that there are probably ways, and there are probably ways that are done somewhat and can be done a lot better in the future. Vertical farming, all the various different things that don't do it. I'm just pointing out that they currently are. If you go to the store right now and buy an Impossible Burger, well, let's not say impossible because that's complicated. But let's just say if you go to the store right now and get white bread. White bread is unhealthy for you. White bread will, anyways, it's very unhealthy for you, and you can have vegan white bread. The pesticides that were used to get that and everything else, and the rodenticides and all these various different things, the things that are killed, they weren't killed for a cause other than your taste buds. If you consume healthy things, you eat apples, bananas, kale, broccoli, and you're consuming them to have a good healthy life, and some insects and birds and stuff died in the meantime because of pesticides, because that's how we had to protect our food, then that makes sense. But when we are willing to kill something to protect, I know it's very different. I'm not in favor of crop deaths arguments against vegans, but when we are willing to kill something for our food that is taste bud only and not for nutrition, it's a whole different world. Haas said, I think that if you take the reducing suffering approach, you would have to advocate for those animals to be eaten rather than the ones whose throats were slit no matter what. Oh, for sure. I can't convince people to consume something they don't want to consume. In fact, that's probably why I couldn't convince people to go hunting versus eating food made from factory farms, because some people just don't like the idea of eating deer, but people definitely don't like the idea of eating cat and dog meat. But they probably should. You know what? I know it's unhealthy for animals to like, including humans, to cannibalize themselves. So you couldn't feed dog to dog, but I wonder if you could feed dog meat to cats and cat meat to dogs. Like I know lions eat baby cheetahs. I just watched a documentary on this yesterday. So I wonder if the euthanized animals in the shelters, if you could make healthier pet meat out of them. This sounds disturbing. I'm talking about it as if this is a normal thing to talk about, but I've just heard these things so much that I'm just trying to be as reasonable as possible, because if we are euthanizing these animals, it might as well go to a purpose. But I don't know if you can. I don't know if it would be unhealthy for a cat to eat dog meat. I agree that there are many things that vegans eat which harm animals and which are not necessary. However, the reason those things harm animals is because of the way farming currently operates. I agree. And so it's all about changing. We need to cut back on pesticides. We need to learn various different ways to farm. If we have to farm with manure now, we do it. If we figure out better ways to not need manure, we do that. Factory farming, we want it gone, but until it's gone, we need better regulation, so on and so forth. Christina said, yeah, that does sound disturbing. Right? It sounds disturbing, but isn't it good? Isn't it good to, if these animals are euthanized, to not let that meat go to waste? By the way, I think it'll take you 4 hours to finish this video like this. Yes, good point. I don't know. I'm very new to this. I don't know how often when people do reaction videos, how often they pause and respond to comments. I'll do these two and then stop. Let's see. The FDA has in fact found euthanasia drug in several brands of dog food. Oh, interesting. And that might be the issue, is the drug that's used for it. So, yeah. All right, here we go. Oh, no. I think it skipped back.
As it were, and trying to proselytize about this kind of thing. Vegangalism, as it's sometimes called. There's an environmental problem as well. That's not
Nope. Okay, sorry,
especially
guys.
in America. I think
farming is infinitely preferable to factory farming. You're still going to run into an ethical qualm when it comes to taking lives that don't need to be taken. I guess I'm a bit more relaxed than most vegans, and I don't even like using the word vegan because people are sometimes upset with exactly how I use the word, how I define it, or the situations in which I think it would be permissible to eat animal products. A lot of people have told me that it's potentially misleading. Really, I just have a commitment to minimizing animal suffering. So coming at this from an ethics perspective more than a practical one, I quite simply just grant the conditional, right? If it is the case that this is going to minimize suffering, then that's the right thing to do. So if it turns out, let's say, that sort of hunting is actually a better way to procure our nutritional requirements, because of course we could eat plants, but plant production, plant agriculture requires killing animals too, and it's possible that in some circumstances hunting an animal might kill less animals and it might actually be less painful for that animal. Like, I don't know about the practicalities of that. I don't know, but I'm just willing to just grant easily that if it is actually the case that involves less animal suffering, then that is the thing to do. Now, most people define veganism, at least the Vegan Society defines it, as a minimization or an exclusion to the highest extent practicable of all forms of animal exploitation. I like to use the word animal suffering there. And it means it's got a slightly strange implication, which is that if veganism is just excluding animal suffering to the highest extent practicable, then even if you are killing an animal for food, if you're doing it in such a way that genuinely minimizes to the highest extent practicable all forms of animal suffering or exploitation, then it's not just that you're permissibly breaking veganism or something. Like you're doing the vegan thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it reminds me of this thing that I don't say often enough. I think one of the issues when farmers that are anti-vegan on YouTube will talk about crop deaths, what they don't realize is that veganism can't really be wrong. The idea is that we want to cause as little suffering and rights violations as possible. So even if there was a world where to grow crops, we had to cause more suffering than to eat animals, that would just mean that we would only eat animals, and that would be the vegan thing to do. We'd consume only animals, we wouldn't consume any crops, and that would be the vegan thing. Whatever leads to the least suffering possible, along with us staying alive, is the vegan thing. Now, some people might sacrifice their own lives, and therefore, if somehow we were in a world where we couldn't grow food anymore and we had to be carnivores to survive, some people might let themselves die. But if it became some hypothetical world where food wouldn't grow without some kind of chemicals that would cause more suffering to animals than just eating the animals, the vegan thing would be to eat the animals. And then at that point, also the vegan thing is to eat them in the best way possible to cause the least amount of suffering, eating the old ones, making sure they have the most free roaming, great lives, whatever. Not that that's the case, but I don't think people realize that when they try to counter veganism. The only way to consider veganism wrong is to be in favor of making animals suffer. And so anyways,
according to the ethical definition, because of course, vegans shouldn't be under the illusion that we're not responsible for any animal suffering. Of course we are. We need to. Most people know about the problem of crop deaths, right? Like the animals are being killed in the production of plants. Of course, vastly more plants are currently being used to feed to livestock, and so the best way to minimize even just crop deaths is to eat the crops directly, because it takes less crops to feed a human than it does to feed livestock. But in other words, like if you think that veganism means that you don't harm animals in the production of your food, then what are you eating exactly? You're probably going to be starving yourself. And so even for the vegan who eats nothing but plants, we're still contributing to some animal suffering. We just recognize that by eating the plants directly, we're contributing to a lot less. So we already grant the idea that to be vegan is just to minimize animal suffering to the highest extent that we can, which means that if there were a situation in which the way to minimize the amount of animal suffering was to go and, shoot the elk, then go and shoot the elk and call yourself a vegan for all I care. I'm just interested in the ethics of minimizing suffering here.
Producers, imagine having samples that make you react like this.
Okay, wait.
That was great. I like that. Okay. I brought you on to talk about a few things, not just veganism. That was good, though. I liked that last bit a lot. I'm in agreement there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agree more than people think that we do. I mean, your condition is different as well, your situation, I mean to say, because of the fact that, like, as far as I understand, like the reason why, I mean, it's funny, your diet will be more restrictive than mine is as a vegan.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's awful.
Which is quite strange, but of course there's a world of difference between your sort of average Joe who like eats KFC because he thinks it tastes nice and animals are here for us to kill, bro, and somebody who says, look, I just actually need this to survive and be healthy. Like, these are different justifications, and embedded into the definition of veganism is practicability. That's kind of the operative word. So like, of course, if it were going to, like, when somebody says it's not healthy to be vegan, the vegan response is usually, well, yes, it is. Like, look at these.
Okay, there's a little bit of talk about the way he says other vegans as if he's different. This comment says he might have said more relaxed than some vegans rather than most, and the way he phrases it almost suggests that vegan militancy is the norm and that he is a special case. Yeah, no, I'm glad to see that, because I kind of talk the way Alex does sometimes, where I have this like concern about veganism. And I think the problem is the loudest people on the internet are the ones that are heard. The people saying the craziest things in any movement. It doesn't matter what movement it is. It's the few people that are saying the craziest things are the ones that are heard, so people view the movement as that. It's the same thing with all kinds of movements. And so maybe I do need to get better. I'm glad that you guys are talking about that over there. Maybe that is something I need to get better at. But it's tough because so many people view vegans as militant and crazy people. And I think it's so good to kind of remove yourself from that and to say, I'm not like those. And I don't know, it's tricky because I feel like the majority of vegans that I hear on the internet are those. But yeah, anyways, I don't think I'm better than anybody, and I don't think he does as well. Let's see. Garland Farms is in here. I see you're busy studying that crop death subject you're so interested in. Okay, so what Garland Farms is referring to is that we had a conversation and we talked about a handful of different things and decided we were going to have a follow-up conversation. And he sent me a handful of studies that I was going to read and prepare for our follow-up conversation, which I did. I read maybe 5 different studies, and I am ready for that follow-up conversation. I happen to also point out to Mr. Garland that I don't like to go the environmental route. I'm perfectly fine with talking about pesticides and rodenticides and all the various different topics that he talks about. But I don't like the idea of talking about how things are affecting, say, like global warming and environmental issues. I think those are complicated. I'm going to make a video on why I don't like to talk about it. But in my mind at this point, until I have an endless amount of time to do research on all things environmental, I leave that up to hopefully the right scientists can convince the right politicians if things need to change for environmental reasons. But for me, I like to talk about ethics, and I can factor in crop deaths into my ethics when it comes to animals. I can also factor in human health when it comes to my ethics. But for me, it's about ethics, and it's not about having a full understanding of how environmental things work. If there are pesticides that are shown to be causing a certain issue, and that is a direct cause, then yes, that's I'm perfectly ready for that conversation. But if there are elements of talking about, say, environmental issues that are different between certain crop farming versus certain animal farming and the CO2 emissions, so on and so forth. So anyways, JD, that's first name for JD Garland. JD, I'm ready for that conversation when you are. Until then, I still need to respond to your last email that you sent me, but I also have a friend that I do some talks with, and we are going to do a talk on some of your stuff and reacting to some of your links that you've sent me, some of the studies. And so there's nothing further that I'm necessarily reading up on for our conversation. But if you're not wanting to have a conversation until I'm ready to talk about the environment, I don't know if that'll necessarily happen, but we'll see. Maybe. Anyways, I'll email you. We'll talk about it. Christina said, veganism is not about the environment. It's about ethics. I agree with you completely. Let's see. There's something in here being talked about called ethicism. And I guess it is a philosophical position that life is essentially wasteful, produces nothing but suffering. For the record, I am not one of those. Okay. Similar to antinatalism. Yes, it can be. Thanks for bringing up the concept has. Thanks. The reason I brought it up. Okay, cool. Here we go.
Look at these studies. Look at the scientific consensus or whatever. Like, vegans generally don't say something like, well, I don't care if it's unhealthy. You have to do it anyway. Right? They say, no, it is healthy, and that's why you have an obligation to do it. But the implication of that, the corollary, is that if it were not healthy, if it were genuinely not healthy and not sustainable for you, then it would be permissible to eat animals. And that's a position that I hold, and I think is a position that's embedded into the very definition of veganism. So if you look at the definition of ethical veganism, look at what it's actually about. it's a lot more sort of inclusive and relaxed, I think, than might be represented by certain vegan activists that you might see on the street screaming about, drinking milk under any circumstances. It's just about minimizing suffering, which most people are already committed to.
Okay, I like it. Now, normally,
They're already committed to, but aren't able to talk about it, and I think that's the fault of us vegans. I really do. I think they don't talk about it because there's nobody willing to talk to them. Because when we vegans, and I don't mean myself, but a large amount of vegans talk to meat eaters, they talk to them about trying to convince them to go vegan, and they usually have about 30 minutes to try to do it, and they have a table talk debate. They don't have conversations about how we can be more ethical, and therefore the only people that likely would ever lead to those conversations, which is us, lead to the good conversations that would cut back on harm. We don't do it because we focus on the full-on veganism. I really think that's our biggest downfall.
at the beginning of each episode, I ask people who they are and what they do, but we just kind of got into it.
Oh,
so,
sure.
if anyone hasn't figured it out by now, can you give a brief background about who you are and what it is you do?
So I'm a vegan, which it's actually amazing that I haven't said that yet. It's not even how I introduce myself on podcasts. It's just how I introduce myself to anybody. It's the first thing I say before my name. My name is Alex O'Connor, and I'm something of a reluctant vegan, actually. I started life on YouTube making videos about the philosophy of religion. Quite embarrassingly, really. I started when I was 16, 17, something like that, and so some of the older material is just embarrassingly poor, but it's been interesting to sort of be able to track this philosophical change and growth. So I made videos about the philosophy of religion, which moved on to talking about philosophy more broadly, and then ethics, and then people kept kind of asking.
Christina said, I do think it was good decision for Alex to go onto her podcast to talk about veganism to her different audience. Unfortunately, I'm disappointed with how he did it for the most part. Gotcha. This is why I focus on opposing rights violations rather than suffering. Yeah, the question is, what can we do more with? We want less rights violations restricted, we want less rights violations happening, and we want less suffering. So out of those two things, what's the best approach to cutting back on both of those important things? And I think really the suffering is the route to go. The first time I watched this, I was sympathetic to his tactics, but he never pushed back. I don't know. I think he pushed back enough here and there. But again, he's actually doing here what I'm claiming that I think all of us vegans should be doing, which is he's talking to non-vegans about something they can get behind, which is factory farming, ending suffering. Let's see. What does rights violation mean? So rights violation. Well, first of all, you'd have to describe what the right is. So if you have a right to life, if I have this right that anybody that agrees with the rights violation to life those people would say that nobody should kill me, or that I shouldn't be enslaved. Maybe a right to not be harmed. Like nobody should just come up and punch me in the face for no reason. So it'd be the same with animals. So it'd be saying that you wouldn't be able to own these cows and breed them and forcefully get them pregnant and take their calves away. It's these rights violations. I don't usually talk about it in that way because you'd have to describe what the right is. I don't think there are any natural rights. Rights are just what we grant animals and humans. And then there's legal rights. And so anyways, it's kind of complicated. And also, let's see. Okay. One can do both. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. I think we should do some form of both. Suffering and rights. That's right. I think suffering is included in rights violations. The term is way more broad. Yes. I just separate them because I think the focus should be on suffering because that seems clear to me. That out of all the rights violations, the one that we can achieve you backtrack until you get to a level where somebody will give in and do that one. If somebody goes out and buys fur and you show them a video of minks having their fur ripped off them alive, and then you show them where they can buy fake fur, then that's maybe something doable. So you go for that route. And same thing where you might ask 100 people to stop eating meat, and 2 of them say yes, but 99 say no. Okay, or sorry, 98 say no. So those 98 that said no, could you convince them to care about the suffering? Could you convince them to want pigs not having their teeth cut out and their tails cut off and having a different approach to the farming style? And I think you can, and I think we don't. And with those 98, we kick them to the curb, and we go to our next 100 to find our 2 out of 100. And I think we can do more. I think we can do better. Yeah. A rights violation can occur when someone has given the right. A rights violation can occur when someone has given the right in the first place, which non-vegans haven't. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Let's see. I think suffering considerations are in the scope of veganism for sure, but rights focus is the bedrock. Now, it's the bedrock in veganism itself, as in what the ultimate goal of veganism is, the idea that you're not going to harm something unnecessarily. And but we have to look at stuff realistically. We have to look in our world, and we got to go, what exists, what's allowed. The law has a lot to do with it, because we want animals to not be killed and harmed and all these things. But in our world, they can be. They legally can be. You can buy, kill, and eat an animal. And so since you can do that, us people that don't want them killed or harmed, we need to do what we can to get as few of them killed and harmed. And so it's not as simple as us just trying to convince a handful of people to go vegan. We have to get the ball going in the right direction of getting people to switch over to how they view these things. Okay.
Asking me just as like a fringe issue. It was sort of like, people would ask me about abortion or euthanasia or, capital punishment or vegan.
Ooh, okay. So I didn't realize we had a non-vegan in here, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I love talking to non-vegans. But this says, so making meat and dairy illegal would be a rights violation since I am an omnivore. So this is complicated. Now, I don't know exactly where I stand on the idea of meat and dairy being illegal. But let's say hypothetically that you do not need meat and dairy to be healthy. Let's say you could be perfectly healthy on eating plants, which supposedly you can. Then the idea of living in a society where the government of your society doesn't protect on a moral basis the suffering and lives of an animal it has to be complete nonsense, right? I mean, so you saying what you're saying, what if somebody said, oh, I can't kill my neighbor and eat my neighbor? You're taking away my rights or that would be a rights violation. And then what would your answer be? You'd say, oh, we can't kill humans. Oh, so why not? And then I'm curious. Well, I'll just ask you. I want you to tell me exactly why you think a society should have a law of why you can't kill or harm other humans. And then I will respond to you if I see that come up.
And I thought, I'll get around to all of these. And one day I finally decided to sit down and read Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, which is to this day the greatest philosophical defense of the vegan position that exists. It was written in 1975. And, well, philosophy is perennial. The first chapter, it reads just as well today. And I just remember thinking, like, I must be missing something. It was so straightforward. And so I made a video on my YouTube channel saying it was called A Meat Eater's Case for Veganism. And I said, look, here are some arguments that I'm considering. I think these lead towards the vegan position, the vegan philosophy. Please, for the love of God, somebody talk me out of it. Please. I really not only do I want to change my mind for the usual reason of just, intellectual consistency and self-challenge, but because I actually really don't want this to be true. I'm a big fan of KFC in particular. I should say taste-wise, not morally. And nobody could. And it's funny, in that video in the beginning, I said in the introduction, oh, don't worry, everybody. This channel isn't becoming like a vegan advocacy channel or something like that. I'm just making one video. It's like, whoops. But it's because nobody could talk me out of it. And so since then, I've become something of a sort of vegan YouTuber speaker. So I'm invited to, do talks and podcasts and stuff. And it's probably the main thing now that I talk about. But it happened essentially by accident.
Okay, Steen said someone must have talked him out of it. So I'm not a fan of the trashing on Alex. As of right now, what we know is that due to his IBS, he has decided to consume things that are not thought of as vegan. And we were pretty sure that he eats some fish. And other than that, it seems like there is something else. Now, when there is something else, I'm guessing it's not something as simple as like bivalves. It's probably maybe like one other animal product. I don't know. I don't know what it is, or maybe eggs. I don't know. But we don't know this. And I don't think it's okay to eat fish. I don't think it's okay to eat eggs. I am okay with bivalves at the moment. But I don't think he has been talked out of this. I mean, Alex seems very genuine. He cares about ethics. He has talked many times about his thoughts on ethics. And I don't think he just randomly woke up and thought, you know what? I don't give a shit about anything anymore. No, for whatever different reasons, even if it's selfish or if it's just convenience, which would be connected to selfish, he eats some stuff that is not vegan. I don't know what that is. I don't know to what degree, but I don't think it's fair to go, you're either vegan or you are not vegan. If somebody does 99% vegan, those people are freaking awesome. And I don't know if that is Alex. I'm guessing Alex is something like that. But if he ate like one fish a week and one egg a week because it made him feel better with nutrients, it sounds like one of his biggest issues is actually his speaking tours or whatever, which in my mind, I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel if I did that kind of thing, but I would probably give him up. But that might be douchey of me to say because I'm not in that position, so maybe I wouldn't. Where I wouldn't be shocked if I had like a crazy health thing and I had to consume a small amount of animal stuff to feel like I had I felt healthy. Like if I ate one fish and one egg a month or something. Luckily, I've never had to do that, but it'd be different for health than for something like a speaking tour. But anyways, my main point is we don't know exactly what he consumes, and he probably consumes an insane amount less than your average person. So when we look at vegan makes like 50 to 100 animals less die a year, maybe it's more than that, like 200 or whatever. And that's this awesome thing we do. If me not eating animals saves 200 animals from dying a year, and Alex changing his diet slightly saves 195 animals a year, and most people kill 200 animals a year, I think Alex is doing pretty awesome here. And that's just me assuming. Okay, so the person that was talking about the rights violation maybe answered my question. Harming a human is not a necessity outside of self-defense. That is why humans should have the right not to be harmed. Food, however, is a necessity, just like a chicken eating a rodent. Okay, so no, this is good. I'm glad you said this, and I don't mean any insult here. So yes, food is a necessity, but a specific food would not be. So similar to how you're saying harming a human is not a necessity outside of like self-defense. Yes, eating food is. So if I had a plate full of food that wasn't animals and a plate full of food that was animal, and they both give you the exact same nutrition, would you, and I'm not saying that is the case. You might be of the opinion that you can't be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet, but let's at least talk hypothetical here for a second. So answer this question first, and then we'll go on. If a non-animal diet could be, if you organize it right and it wasn't hard to do, if it was identically healthy, would you say that animals don't need to be harmed, and just like you said, humans don't need to be harmed? Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Somebody responded to him. There's no biological requirement. Yep. Okay, he said to somebody else, the mass majority of people on Earth eat a plant-based diet. What? On Earth, eat a plant-based diet. I don't know what that means. Okay. Bivalves, how we would still be few, let's see, habitat and breed them, or carefully pick them out of natural habitat and hope not to have biodiversity balance. Yeah, I'm not sure. With bivalves, I'm just talking from an ethical standpoint, from my understanding. I don't know how sustainable it would be. So we'll see. If children weren't meant to be eaten, then why are they made out of meat? Nice. Okay. Also, I probably got to get going here pretty soon, so I might not be able to finish this, but I'm going to go a little further.
What was that?
That was 2019, April of 2019. So not sort of that long ago, actually. But I mean, it feels like it's been forever. And even in that time, like, my position has wildly changed. I mean, it started with this case of like, wow, I had no idea about any of this. I'm just going to put a hold on all my animal product consumption until I have a bit more time to sort of work it all out. And I've spoken to people from, it's the great thing about being a podcaster, having an opportunity, as you'll know, to be able to just speak to so many wonderful, interesting people. So I've been able to speak to ethicists and dietitians, and I've been able to speak to psychologists about the nature of pain in the brain and how it works and this kind of thing. And so my sort of position has been consistently evolving. But not once have I come close to doubting the idea that if we can avoid inflicting suffering upon an animal, then we should do so. So the main thing that changed my mind on that was an argument. It was a sometimes called name the trait, which basically asks, there are a few ways to word it, but you might want to ask something like, okay, so 86% of pigs or thereabouts in the UK who are killed for slaughter are killed in gas chambers. So they're forced into metal cages and lowered into chambers of carbon dioxide, which is, I mean, you can watch it on YouTube and you can see it's a pretty painful experience. It also like acidifies the liquids in their eyes and mouths. Okay, so this is pretty gross. Now, we would recognize that if we were to force human beings into a gas chamber, that would be wrong. In fact, it would be evocative of one of the worst evils in human history. And so the name the trait argument can be surmised as saying something like, well, how like a pig and in what ways would that human have to be before you'd be okay with forcing it into a gas chamber? So you name the trait. So some people say that, well, pigs are far less intelligent than humans are, and that's why we have more moral worth. So, okay, so the trait is intelligence. So let's take a human being and let's lower their intelligence. Let's lower their intelligence to the state of a pig. So let's give them like the tiniest cognitive ability that you can imagine. Can I force that human being into a gas chamber off the back of that? No, in fact, you'd probably consider it more evil to do that on the justification that they have a low intelligence. Okay, so what if I gave the human being like 2 new legs instead of arms? Can I force them into a gas chamber? Well, definitely not. What about if I made their skin pink? You know, is skin color the relevant factor here? Well, definitely not. Okay, so you can essentially metamorphize this human being into a pig. You can say, well, let's take this human being, give him 4 legs, pink skin, curly tail, intelligence level of a pig, you know, experiences the world as a pig, suffers like a pig. Can I force this human being into a gas chamber? And it seems like you never get to a point where you say, okay, now we found the justification, now it's okay, you can put this being into a gas chamber. But you end up with a creature that's identical to the creature that we started with, which is the one that we force into gas chambers, and not to win a war, not to buttress the economy, not to build infrastructure, but because we think they taste nice. And it just seemed ethically obvious to me. And so I thought I must be missing something if this is still such a sort of fringe minority view. And so the past few years of my life have been an exercise in, you know, trying to get people to talk me out of it.
You should talk to Diana Rogers, because your argument makes sense if meat wasn't, I think, necessary for health. And I think I think that there's a lack of studies. I think that the studies are there, and I think Diana Rogers, who's a
I'm kind of curious, for all the vegans watching this, how many of you feel, well, to what level would health have to decline to make you feel good about consuming animals? So let's say that consuming an omnivore diet, which I don't think we're designed to do. We're probably designed to have more of a frugivore, like a chimpanzee. But just for the sake of hypothetical, let's say that on a very healthy omnivore, like paleo type diet, and not real Paleolithic, but paleo or a modern paleo named diet, that a human could be at an optimal of like 100% health. And that the best, let's say hypothetically, the best health you could be at for being vegan would be like 75%. So you'd be fine. You'd be able to like live out your life, but you would be, let's say you were a lot weaker and I don't know, maybe you needed to sleep a little more or something. I don't know exactly what would happen, but let's just say if you looked at the numbers 75 and 100, would you consider the harm of killing and eating animals so bad that you would allow your health to get to 75 versus trying to like consume little bits of whatever you needed to that caused harm in the best way you could to get your health up to the 100%? Like kind of a how do you outweigh veganism versus health in a hypothetical world where animal products were necessary?
dietitian who does, she wrote The Sacred Cow, and she's very interested in regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming. But I think your argument would stand if it was just about taste and if we could get all the nutrients from a vegan diet. But I think that I don't think long-term veganism helps people.
Okay, Wendy, I see you're here. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, let's see. Lewis, there won't be another stream right after this. Actually, I do got to hop off here in a sec. But on Sunday, I actually have, I believe, 4 different vegan talks from morning through afternoon, and they're going to be fun with Q&As. Let's see. Okay, so somebody called the Garuda Legends person a troll and said don't talk to them. I was giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I asked a handful of questions. The fact that they ignored my last one about a hypothetical where a plate of essentially a perfectly healthy vegan diet being equal to an animal diet, would they consider it necessary to kill the animals? And they ignored that question. So yeah, it does seem like maybe they are just being a troll. But if not, like I'm very interested in talking to just about anybody. You don't have to be vegan. I like talking to non-vegans. Okay, so Wendy said, for me, probably if vegan could only be 75%, I might eat a little bit of animal foods. For me, it comes down to longevity and length of a good life. I think if veganism could get me to 85, I'd take, let's see, take the 15 hit. Yeah, 15% hit. Okay, so Lewis said, let's see, if meat consumption was necessary to live reasonably healthy, it would be understandable, but not morally responsible to kill innocent sentient individuals for your own gain. Okay, yeah, no, I agree. It wouldn't change the moral aspect. Causing something that can suffer, causing them suffering, even if it's reasonable or necessary or whatever, it's still immoral. But I would still do it. So yeah, I agree with you. So if no nutrient would help, the moral question would be the most annoying thing, like sexual urge for a Christian. Yeah. Okay, sorry. The person I said maybe is a troll said they did answer the question. Let's see. I would eat the non-animal food if it had the same health outcome, especially if humans were herbivores. Okay, I'm sorry. You did answer the question. I actually thought you were pretty reasonable with talking to me, and I only thought that troll element because somebody said it, and then I thought the thing was ignored. So my bad. Cool. So I guess that's kind of my point. So if you're saying that it's not okay to kill humans because we don't need to, then I guess my thought would be there seems to be enough research out there showing that we do not need to eat animals and you can be perfectly healthy on a vegan diet. But I will also say that this is pretty new. Being vegan isn't necessarily new, but studies on it and knowing long-term effects are pretty new. I feel confident enough with it. My 6-year-old daughter has been vegan since birth. I've been vegan for about 8 years. And I know many people that have been vegan for a long time, and also there are many studies that show that it's good. I don't think it should be illegal to consume animal products, because if it was necessary for health, I don't think it would be reasonable for a society to outlaw it. But in the meantime, while we're figuring that out, I think it's it's worth reading the studies, seeing what's going on. But I guess we're on the same page because you are pointing out that you only think an animal should be eaten if we needed it for health. So I guess my next question for you is, do you think it's reasonable for humans to eat unhealthy animal products? So if you eat something like chicken nuggets, hot dogs, ice cream with all the sugar in it, is that reasonable? Do you think that's not a rights violation to the animals when you don't need to? So I'm looking forward to that answer. FYI, Modern Paleo says you cannot eat beans, so it's really not that great. Yeah, no, beans are great. I just said paleo as an example, but essentially I was just pointing out. Well, anyways, yeah, it's adding some meat and eggs to a whole food diet, basically. Let's see. So most people, have you looked at tailored diets based on genetics? Inuit, for example, it can be beneficial for health eating meat. Interesting. I have not seen that, but I like looking into anything. Most people, they feel a thing and they want to see the things that align with what they believe already so they can feel good about what they believe. I have this strange thing where I like to see the opposite. I like to read all the studies and kind of like what Alex is saying here. I want to be convinced I'm wrong in any topic because I want to get closer to feeling like I know the truth. So whether it's a topic like like animal rights or something like abortion or circumcision or a death penalty or whatever, I want to hear the best arguments on the other side. So anyways, I'll look into that Inuit thing. To popularity in nature. Okay.
And that's like mostly what I've read online, anecdotes, and then studies. I also know that if you put really, really young kids on a vegan diet, that can be really hard on their brain. But if they eat animal products, it's not. So I think your argument would stand true and would be impenetrable if meat wasn't such a health food.
Yes, and of course, you're right that the science is still very much in its infancy, and we must be careful. Okay, like this is really important. If there is a risk that this is actually really not nutritionally adequate and we're feeding it to children not really knowing what we're doing and essentially blinded by what becomes ideology, it merges from just a commitment to minimizing animal suffering to an allegiance to vague principles that are
Okay, so the comment says pushback opportunity for Alex here. So here's the thing. This is why, and I might just happen to agree with Alex, but this is why I actually love how Alex handles this conversation, because he's pointing out something very important. He's coming across as very reasonable. He's saying that these studies are new, because I mean they are. They have to be. The existence of studies is new. You know, things haven't been studied for that long. The knowledge and understanding of evolution started with Darwin in the 1800s. We're less than 200 years from that. So the idea of health studies, there's just so much to learn. Now, again, it's so likely that we are somewhat like chimpanzees or other primates, where we are supposed to consume like 75% fruit, maybe 10% other vegetation like greens and whatnot. Also nuts. And then in their cases, they consume insects and some other things. Where we can supplement handfuls of things or eat various different things that would give us the same nutrients as those. Like primates don't cook beans, but we can cook beans and get all the proteins and well, we can get protein out of anything, but we can get all the amino acids out of beans and various different things. So I do not think that we're going to find out through studies that people need to consume animal products, but for anybody listening, but especially from non-vegans listening to this, Alex talking to her and pointing out that that we don't know. We need to be careful. We need to look at the studies, which is why I don't think we would want laws to come in right away or anything. We should be able to convince people that they shouldn't kill these animals just to eat a freaking hot dog. If they truly need to do it for this reason, they do it for that reason. But then most people, as they think about it, they will get to veganism. They will, because most people are good people, and but a lot of people haven't thought about a lot of different topics. But anyways, I really like what he says here. Let's see. Somebody asked. Shake. Yeah, okay. So Wendy pointed out that Alex is being cautious, but Peterson is speaking with confidence she shouldn't be. And yeah, that's a good point. So anyways, I think Alex is doing a good job. I think we should be cautious. Neutrally or a middle ground is not always reasonable, but if he says studies about veganism are new, he should push back even more on carnism. Very good point, Christina. He should. He should have pointed out, and maybe he does, that eating a carnivore diet is insanely new. That's way newer than veganism. So yeah, that's a very great point. Okay. If you didn't need, let's see, if I did not need to consume meat, even in small amounts, I would consider killing an animal unnecessary. If it was illegal, then I would consider it a rights violation. Okay. Okay. Not a rights violation against your rights, but if it was unnecessary, then it would be a rights violation against them, and you would want it to be illegal. That's awesome. Okay, so whoever called you a troll here, maybe they should read through your comments here, because I think you're making good points. And so yeah. Anyways, I don't have any interest in convincing people to feel strongly about, if you've read the studies and you feel strongly about needing to eat some animal products, whatever, if you are a person that is not consuming the unhealthy stuff. So I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that part. So now you, in this real world outside of the hypotheticals, you think you're an omnivore and need to eat some animal products. So now the question would come down to, do you think it's reasonable to eat unhealthy animal products if you think we should only be able to eat animal products because they're healthy for us? So I would love to see your comment on that. Have you read the China study? I actually haven't. I want to read the China study. I've watched enough on it. I've seen enough commentary to know good stuff. Huge studies done on the topic. Yeah, based Wendy. Yep. I'm very skeptical about the claim that most people are good. If good is to mean not selfish, humans tend to be. Now that's a good point. I used to, I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this. I've done a little bit of writing on this. And yeah, I don't know if I am convinced that most people are good. I think most people are followers. I think we've evolved to follow and to go along with what other people do. And luckily, in a lot of cases, especially in our modern world, the good thing at some point gets done to a level where people follow it. I think your average person, I think your average person, if they knew they could get away with it and they would not get caught in any way, nobody would know they did it, there's probably people they would kill, or at least harm severely. And I think so. I don't know why I'm pointing this out, because I don't have anything to necessarily back that up, but it's just where I'm currently at. And so, yeah, I don't know if people are good, but I do think people can be reasoned with and made to act good, or at least made to accept that there is a level of good that should happen in a society that should have levels of protection. I'll go with that. Very uncertain about creating laws around not eating meat, but I'm getting more and more convinced we should head in that direction. Yeah, I think we at very least need to have laws to where anybody that does anything with something that can suffer, that needs to be on video, and especially when there's cases where somebody can be harmed. And then we really just need to be spreading the message about not needing it for the unhealthy stuff. Maybe the super unhealthy stuff like the chicken nuggets and the hot dogs and ice cream. It's funny I have those 3 examples. That stuff maybe should be hella taxed. No subsidies going to factory farms. There are a lot of processes that we can go through that probably need to happen and that can happen that will eliminate a lot of suffering before we figure out if it's reasonable to make it completely illegal to kill. I agree with that take. Most people are reasonable vegan, fair take. Okay.
Sort of followed no matter what, because they're just sort of thought to be true by a community, then we run into problems. As I say, I'm sort of willing to grant this conditional claim that if it's not actually healthy, then not only is it sort of morally permissible to not be a vegan, as it were, but to basically eat the minimal amount that we need to be healthy and still call yourself a vegan. I mean, we could probably do away with.
Right. That's a good point. I might have mentioned this earlier, but yeah, if we found out, let's say we found out that the healthiest thing to do is what Mikhaila's doing, where all we eat is meat, nothing else, no dairy, no eggs, no vegetation. We just eat meat. The most moral thing to do would be to find out how much we needed to be the healthiest we can be and never overconsume. And then we'd also have the ethical practices for how we got that meat. But no over consuming. So just interesting.
The word, it wouldn't be very helpful. But
I guess the reason I point that out is if people want to be moral and consume animals, they need to cut out the processed garbage. They need to do away with those hot dogs.
It's worth bearing in mind that if it's the case that we think, okay, well, meat is required for a healthy diet, or at least animal products of a kind, sure, but this, of course, doesn't give us license to overindulge. And it doesn't give us license to procure these products from factory farms. I mean, even if it is the case that we need these products in order to be healthy, there is simply no excuse, none, for what we're currently doing.
Very true. Vegan, of course. Oh, hey, I've heard about your channel, and somebody told me they were going to recommend you to me to have a conversation. So let's do that. But anyways, your comment says, all we actually have to do is outlaw breeding or make it insanely expensive. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Now, I think it's similar to outlawing the eating of meat, but it's a fairly different step that I actually really like. And so it's probably due to safety concerns why we don't. Because if you outlaw breeding, but you don't outlaw animal eating, then it'll all come down to hunting. And so, yeah, I like the idea of it would be better than what we have now if the only animals that were eaten were ones that were essentially hunted of sorts. Or even if farms kind of treated what they're doing like hunting, if there was a way to know that they were killed the most humane way possible, which is hard to do while hunting. But essentially, if you had a huge like forest and all the grass and trees and everything, and their cows roaming just like deer did, and they never got anything horrible happening to their lives, they're not branded, they're not forced into tiny areas, they're not fed garbage diets that make them feel like shit all day. But the only negative part is taking away their rights of life. This is horrible and it sucks, but it's 1,000 times better than what we have now. If you make it illegal to breed, then that's essentially what you have, where it'd be hunting. And I'm guessing the reason they don't want to do that is because getting away from so many people hunting, which there'd have to be a lot of people hunting in that case, is that you might have way too many safety issues with hunters out there hitting other hunters. Oh yeah, I was going to read one more thing. I think Garuda, which by the way, if you on my channel, if you go to the About section, my email's there. Send me a message. I would like to have you on the channel so we can talk. Let's see. I would say it is a bad idea to eat unhealthy processed animal products over fresh meat. I think a lot of processed ingredients should be banned for sale in cooked food. Cool. That's awesome. And that's the cool thing. You're here, you're not vegan, and you're talking about ideas that a lot of us vegans would agree with. And I think that's very good. And we all need to be talking about these things, even if we don't all agree with each other. You're against hamburger. Okay. Yeah. I'm curious. Christina asked him if he's against hamburger, sausages, hot dogs. And he said, I eat a plant-based diet. I am not on a vegan diet. Okay, and I think that's referring to probably eating plants as in, but plant-based diet. Okay, but you eat meat though, right? You said you're an omnivore. So are you saying that you eat like whole foods and meat? Is that what's going on here? I would ban animal product consumption in a heartbeat. If there are fringe cases, I believe in, which I believe in vanishingly small, where people truly need to eat it to be healthy, we can create exception. No, I mean, fair point. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't go to that level right now, but I'm not so far from that level that I think it's horrible that you're saying it. Yeah, I'd be curious. It'd be interesting to press a button to make everybody, let's just say make everybody go vegan, and or at least let's say in first world countries, make everybody go vegan, and then it was illegal for anything not vegan to exist, and then we see what happens for like 6 months or a year or whatever. It'd be very interesting. I'm just going to call it interesting for now. And I would like to see the outcome. Plant-based means not eating animals. Yeah, I'm curious to see the response to that. Okay, vegan, of course, said I had an 80-year-old vegan on the show, and he's healthy. All these things are ridiculous claims when it comes to health. Yeah, but let's not forget, anecdotes are just anecdotes. Now, I agree with you. Like I just said a second ago, I think we probably should be eating something like what chimps eat, and in the long run, almost all humans, what's best for us is a whole food plant-based diet. But an 80-year-old being vegan, even if he was vegan since birth, which he probably wasn't, but let's say he was, that individual doesn't tell us all that we need to know. But it's a good point. 4%, Laszlo said 4%. I'm not sure what that's to, but I might have missed some comments. Please do not promote hunting. We would lose the rest of the wild animal biomass within a week. Yeah, I don't know if there'd have to be limits. I think when you go hunting, you can get like one deer per hunt. I don't know if it's different like for birds. I'm not in favor of hunting. I'm just choosing better than other situations. But yeah, anyways, I'll leave that there. At this moment, it would just be pragmatic for vegans to propose a ban. There is no political will. One reason I'd say not to, and I usually don't talk like this, but is to not come across crazy. If people know that you want to ban eating animals, it comes across more crazy than the idea of wanting people not to own pets. And I'll mention all the things, but I usually caveat it. But it's just that the idea of banning it's just extreme at this level, I think. Most people won't hunt. That's true. It'd be interesting. I think we have a health issue in first world countries, and in the same sense that I think that people shouldn't. I like the idea of people not being able to buy processed garbage that has like processed sugar in it, where if they wanted to have processed sugar, they'd have to get sugar cane and process the sugar themselves and then make their own thing, in a similar way to if somebody is not willing to kill the animal themselves, then they'll be forced to go vegan. So it kind of tests what they're willing to do. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Okay, the strive for a Mediterranean diet is a plant-based diet. I am curious. I might have missed your message, but I am curious if what you eat is plant-based, as in you're saying you eat whole food, but you also eat because you said, I think you called yourself an omnivore earlier. So I'm curious, maybe you don't do dairy, but you do meat, and because some people consider whole food includes meat. Lunch meats and cheeses should be stopped produced. Yeah. Well, especially schools. We should start with schools. All the processed garbage, unhealthy stuff that we're feeding to children is just horrible. Years ago, I met a healthy 103-year-old man who lived his last 60 years without consuming animal products. That's awesome. Our fish vegetables. Okay. I eat a plant-based Mediterranean diet. I'm just not vegan. I think, yeah, but I'm curious. Do you also eat meat? That's to the Garada person. Let's see. John Cross was vegan from birth, 80-year-old. Mike Russell, vegan from birth, 73. Awesome. Yeah. In case it's coming across wrong, I do think humans are designed, not just that we are able to get by on a plant-based diet. I think we are, from everything I've seen and researched, we are designed to be on a plant-based diet. I just think it's worth keeping an open mind when it comes to these things. Steen, it's interesting. So you say that Garado guy is just trolling, and it's possible. I am curious to hear his next comment. Let's see. Okay, he said plant-based globally means your diet is based on plants and you can include meat and dairy. Interesting. Okay, so maybe globally plant-based is referring to like whole food. Because like when people talk about like Whole30, you can't have any processed food. You can have whole fruits and veggies, but then also meat. So it's kind of interesting. It muddies the water a little bit. But I don't see this person as trolling. They could be lying and therefore trolling, but they're not leading to any nonsense that I'm worried about. Replacing equal amount of protein coming from factory farming with hunting is not necessarily better than factory farming when considering the toll on wildlife and the earth that hunting would require. That's very possible. Again, that kind of lines up with the idea of like environmental stuff that I think is too complicated for me to go over, and I definitely don't have the time to learn about the details of it. So one thing that hunters will say in defense of hunting is that if you don't hunt, the deers will overpopulate and get diseases and it'll be horrible. And I think that's a silly argument because just like throughout all of history, especially before hunters, when there were plenty of animals before humans existed, if animals overpopulated, yes, the natural cycle would be that they get diseases and some die off, and that's just like how nature works. But we don't need to kill and eat them to stop that. If anything, if we thought we needed to kill them for their own sake, like kill some to make the other ones flourish more and less get disease, then the argument would just be to kill some to make the overall amount suffer less, which would be fine, but that wouldn't be an argument for eating them. And I think the same goes the other way around, where if somebody was going to go hunt and that would negatively affect the environment because you're taking an animal out that normally would eat maybe certain foods or whatever, if we were able to detect that and look at the exact numbers and get it figured out, then maybe we would want to work on that. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't like to go that route, and I think I just leave that to the scientists to convince the politicians that if there is something like that that needs to happen, then that gets put into law. But we can't all be environmental experts, and I definitely can't be. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't look into it and have their own stance on it. Yes, basically whole foods, fresh meat, veggies. Awesome, cool. Try to avoid sugars and processed grains. And yeah. I don't think it's good to eat meat. I don't think we need to. But honestly, if everybody ate like Garuda, sorry about the name situation, then I think that'd be great. I want people to go in that direction because I care about animals and I care about suffering. And it sounds like what you're doing would cut back a lot on that. And it also cuts back on human suffering. We need to stop feeding our children garbage food. Okay, somebody told him to eat Impossible burgers. So here's the problem. Let's imagine Impossible burgers had something we needed that was similar to a beef burger, and we needed that for survival. And let's say that eating plants and an Impossible burger every day, or plants and a beef burger every day, gave you what you needed, but the Impossible burger added some negative side effects to health. Then I would say, depending on the amount of health difference, that it would be reasonable to say, consume the one beef patty a day. And if we humans needed it, which we don't, but this is a hypothetical, because telling this person to eat the Impossible burger, that would be worth telling a person that eats unhealthy food. If this person truly just eats whole foods, fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds, and then also consumes some of what's considered the healthier types of meats, having them swap out the healthy meats for an Impossible burger is not going to be more beneficial for them. It will be for the animals, but it won't be for their own health, which is why I don't think it's the best push for us vegans to do. No offense, if you want to do that, you could, but I just don't think so. But yeah, I like their response is that they like to make their own veggie burger from scratch, which is probably the route to go. A lot of people don't like beets, but there's a really good recipe in the Dr. Greger's recipe book about making homemade veggie burgers out of beets and a few other things. But yeah, take these whole foods and make healthier foods for sure. Okay, cool. I'm going to get back to this.
To animals for what is, as I say, essentially an overconsumption problem. The numbers involved are just like unthinkably.
Okay, Louis said eating one beef patty requires the unjustful killing of the entire innocent cow. Yeah, I might have spoke too quick and didn't express what I was saying that well. I was saying if you needed the nutrients from a beef patty, one a day, to be a healthy human, and also you could get it in an Impossible burger. But let's say the other parts, the fruits, veggies, nuts, and seeds and all that, got you to 60% health. But then the Impossible burger would get you to 75% health, but the burger would get you to 100% health. I think I would eat that burger. Luckily, being a person that doesn't want to harm animals, I don't have to do that. But I'm just talking in a hypothetical world. The idea of telling somebody that wants to eat a healthy form of meat or healthier form of meat to eat an Impossible Burger instead, that argument only works on somebody that's eating for taste pleasure. If somebody eats a burger and they want something that's comparable, Impossible Burgers are incredible. I think they're one of the tastiest things ever. I actually think they're better to make at home than at the restaurants because, like Burger King, it doesn't come out that well. I try not to eat them because I want to get healthy. I want to be really fit. I want to do backflips when I'm 80 and hang out with the grandkids and go hiking and stuff. So I want to be healthy. But when people are just talking about the not hurting animals and people are willing to eat unhealthy hot dogs, yes, swap that shit out for an Impossible sausage. Those are really good too. I was just saying it's really tough to convince a person that eats really healthy and also consumes some healthier types of meat to swap out their meat for a processed vegan burger. It's just, it's just tough. Wendy, yes, do it. I mean, be healthy, be strong. But if you're not, go eat that Impossible Burger.
Unthinkably huge, especially when you think about sea life, which is just the most incredible. I mean, sometimes I like to say, I don't quite know how to get it across, so sometimes I just say, since I started this sentence, around 150,000 wild fish have been caught from our oceans, which is roughly 4 seconds. And in the space of 2 minutes, that will have risen to 3.6 million in 2 minutes, right? The numbers involved are huge, but also the lived experience of these animals, pigs forced into gas chambers, cows being separated from their calves. Everybody knows about this kind of stuff.
I'm going to be eating a Chipotle.
Ooh, Chipotle. Okay, I actually do got to hop off here. I meant to hop off here about an hour ago. I made this last way too long. But anyways, thanks for being here, guys. If anybody has any last questions, I will answer them really quick. But other than that, on Sunday at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 1 p.m. PST, I will be doing live talks, conversations with, I think all of them are fellow vegans. One of them might be with a non-vegan. But yeah, and so come on here, ask all the questions. There's going to be a whole bunch of interesting topics, like if vegans need to be healthy, if not being vegan, not being healthy makes you not like a full-on complete vegan. There's going to be one about animal extinction and whether it really matters if a species is kept alive if it doesn't affect the ecosystem. There's going to be questions on what we would want laws to be, which we talked about a little bit here. Will you finish the video in a different stream? Yes, I will. I have it saved, and I will finish from where I left off, and I'll try to do the whole thing. I paused it too many times for chatting. It was fun for a bit. I was here. I wish I could see the lives more, but I work on Sundays. Extinction. Yeah, I'll send you an email with a link to that one when that's done. But yeah, awesome guys. It was good talking, and keep saving animals, even if we do it in different ways. I might focus on the suffering part, and other people focus on the rights violations completely. But let's keep doing it. Get out on the streets, talk to strangers. That's what I gotta say is the best way to change anything. You want to change stuff with veganism, with like abortion, with circumcision, with all these different things. These will only change with conversations. If no humans talk to other humans about what they think is right and wrong, then the people that we elect as politicians that make our laws will not change something just for fun. They are hired by us to do what we demand, but we have to demand it. Like all of us have to demand it. So we have to get enough people agreeing with us. So go out, have conversations, be friendly with people. Definitely be friendly with people. Don't treat people badly. And anyways, what am I talking about? I'm going to stop rambling. But yeah, take care, guys. See you soon.